Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, did you know there's a skill many men never learn that ends up seriously limiting your professional success and satisfaction in your love and sex life? I put together a free guide to explain this unknown skill and give you exactly what you need to use it today. Get it by heading over to ShaynaJamesCoaching.com or text the word ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144. That's 44144. You'll also get access to Man Alive outtakes, raw footage, and bonus videos you can only get there. Welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I'm here with Dr. HazelGrace. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited.
Me too. So I recently attended this event that Dr. HazelGrace has done about 40 of them if we count men and women. So it's the Cock Project and the Pussy Project. And I recently attended the Cock Project in San Francisco, and it was a profound experience for me. And we're going to get into more of what it is and how it goes and all of that. But first, I want to give a little introduction for those of you who do not know the doctor. And Dr. HazelGrace is the co-founder of the Cock Project, the Pussy Project, and the Genitals Project. She works with individuals and couples as a clinical sexologist and a sexological body worker practitioner. And she supports them in having the healthiest and most fulfilling sex of their lives. She's also profoundly impacted by the amount of psychological and emotional violence that has been and is currently being done to men, women, and individuals across the gender spectrum. So she recognizes that the world needs healing and comprehensive sex education. And she's an unyielding stand for the end of global sexual shame so that humans can experience heart-centered and empowered sexuality. And one way she supports this movement is by bringing these workshops to cities across the nation. So thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for the bold and I would say risky, stand that you're taking. And I love that you're standing for the end of global sexual shame because it's massive and it's painful and a lot of people are suffering as a result of it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me be in this conversation with you. And also thank you for being a member with me on that team of helping us end global sexual shame.
Yes. Yeah. I want that.
Yeah.
So I want to paint the picture a little bit because for men who are thinking, okay, what on earth is the Cock Project and how did I end up there? And what is it that you're creating? I want to give you a chance to paint the picture, but I guess I want to paint more of the scene, which is that, I got to participate in this beautiful creation to, like you said, heal sexual shame. And so I attended a workshop where there was a lot of setup, to have everyone feel safe. And then basically what happened was that the men were in this inner circle and sharing about their sexual experiences, their relationship with their cock, their, stories and kind of ideas and what they'd been taught or not been taught by their parents and by their culture and, talked about masturbation, all of these topics. And as a woman, I got to sit and hold space and just bring love and compassion and eventually share, the impact that these really vulnerable and brave men had on me and on me being a mother to a young child. So yeah, it was profound. And I'm curious, what else you would say, right? Before we go into the history and how it came to be and all of that, how would you describe or how do you describe this event to me?
Yeah, thanks. And I loved you being there. It was so beautiful to have you there and holding such beautiful space. The thing that is loudest to me right now that I want to clarify is that for the Cock Project, we invite anyone who identifies as having a cock or a penis which may include men, right? But
Yes,
we're welcome to invite trans people, anyone who identifies as having a cock. Yeah. And then the witness circle is anyone on the gender spectrum. So sometimes we even have man identified or cock owners sit on the outside, which is also welcome too.
Got it.
And I think what I want to say is that it's such an interesting experience of the human experience, where the paradox that we think that we're so different from other, and this inner circle, outer circle, where we get to share our truth and our stories and the presence of those who are witnessing us. What we oftentimes find is that in every single circle, people have the experience of, wow, I had no idea I'm actually way more the same than I am different. Yeah. And we all struggle the same struggles, and sometimes it may look a slightly different, but really it's all so human is really what it boils down to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, again, there was confidentiality, so I'm not going to say anything specific, but I just will say from my own experience, and from my own experience in life too, right? Like there's a gap in what we're taught when we're young.
It's giant.
And how much information we get. And, my parents, I think my mom handed me the Where Do I Come From book when I was 16 or something and said, oh, I meant to give you this when you were little or when you were 6 or something. And I was like, well, I've learned everything I know about sex now through Cosmo and my girlfriends.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't know, it would be great for me to have a conversation with someone on this too about, how you age appropriately continue to broach the subject of sex when kids sometimes don't even want to talk about it. But, what you're doing is creating healing so that people who have cocks or, cock, penis, however you identify, right, that you don't have to be bound in this shame, and then bring that to your relationships instead of the freedom and the play and the joy and the pleasure and the intimacy.
Yeah. And it totally is for the cock havers, cock owners. And the first time I sat in the circle, which I created 4 years ago, and 80 people showed up, and I didn't know that was going to happen.
Wow.
And I had no idea. It was kind of an accident how it happened. But I can remember as a woman, as a witness, when I asked a question, I'm almost coming to tears because I remember one of the sharers sharing that the first time that they had an ejaculation or an orgasm, they thought that they had to go to the emergency room, or they thought that they were broken, or they were scared. And this is a very common thing. And as a woman, as a pussy owner, I've never even considered that. And like the amount of trauma that a lot of cock owners experience because of our lack of education. And as a woman, I've expanded my compassion for what they've been through.
Yes.
So for so long, as someone who's experienced sexual abuse from a man, for so long, I thought it was me who had it hard, and it's women who are abused, and it's the women who've got it, we've got the raw end of the deal, and we don't have it easy. No one has it easy. That's the important thing, I think, is that we're all in pain and we're all suffering.
Yeah.
And so the idea, the beauty of these circles is that what I like to say is that the pain that we're all experiencing on a collective level has been co-created over a long period of time. And so the way to begin to unwind that co-created pain is to show up together and listen to one another. And it's so simple, and I'm getting goosebumps because it's so simple, yet it's so potent.
Yes. Yeah. And what would you say for a man who is thinking, are you kidding me? Or again, this is my blind spot, and I'm just going to own it, right? That I did grow up in very traditional gender roles. And so
totally. Yeah.
So I'm doing my best. And
awesome.
Okay. So for a cock owner who is like, seriously, I'm going to go talk about my very vulnerable private experiences in front of other people who I don't really know and I may never see again. Like, how do you navigate that with people?
Yeah. And you didn't say it, but yeah, they're going to be sharing in front of women too. Right. That's another key part, right? There's a couple things I want to say about that. One is nobody has to share. The second thing is we spend, as you know, such a generous amount of time at the beginning, creating what I call a ground of health, collective trust, rapport, and strong, clear context of why we're doing what we're doing, and the amount of freedom and choice that every individual has at any moment to share or not share. And I've had I shouldn't say many. I've had participants in the past say, I'm going to sit in the witness circle and I'm not going to step into the inner circle. Yes. By the end of the night, they come up to me and they say, I regret not being in the middle. And if this happens again, I'm totally going to jump in the middle. And I remember in Texas, we had so interesting from the very beginning when he was, there was a man and he chose to sit in the outside circle. When he introduced himself and he shared, he was so clogged up and so quiet and so scared just to be there. And at the very end, when the witness circle got to share what their experience was, I didn't recognize him. I thought to myself, who came in? Because it was a literally different person that had come alive by witnessing other cock owners share their stories. Yeah. And if someone's nervous and scared to show up to this thing, all the more reason. And I get that it's a risk. I get that what we're asking people to do is kind of against what culture has told them to do, right? Right. It's asking the opposite of them, to be vulnerable and to expose themselves and to say I'm hurt and scared and I need help, or even to celebrate and say I love my cock and I love having sex and all the wonderful things too. And that's the other important thing that we haven't mentioned, is that these circles aren't just about sharing shame. Right. It's also, I strongly believe that we can experience healing and shedding shame in the celebration and claiming and owning and being a witness in us claiming our magnificence and our amazingness.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, right? I mean, I've facilitated many workshops too with the Authentic Man program and the Authentic Woman experience, where we actually bring men and women together, on the last day of each of those workshops to get to practice and have really loving, honest feedback and reflection, and, give men and women each a chance to practice with the opposite gender, because these workshops tend to be, heterosexual. And say things or express things or cry or admit certain things that they've never admitted to someone else, or never admitted to someone else of the opposite gender. And the healing that I've witnessed is profound, and that I witnessed at your event was profound. And there seems to be this code of silence that we've all been, I can't say all, right? But that many of us feel like, we've gotten raised in or stuck in, and then to actually speak out, when most other people are not speaking out, then is that much more vulnerable. Yeah.
I got this from a participant. The other thing I love about participating in these circles is I keep learning more and more and more. Yeah. And one of the participants said something that helped me understand my story more, because they said, I wasn't told anything about sexuality, and that told me everything. Oh, yeah. And that everything was, it's not talked about, it's not appropriate, we don't mention it, it's bad, it's shameful, it's da-da-da. So it helped me understand, my parents never actually sat me down at the table and said, by the way, sex is bad and shameful.
Right. That's not often what happens. Well, actually, that's not true. A lot of people do get that. Right. But there are also many where it just is more unsaid than there's this, negative, concrete sex is bad. It's just more picked up from the lack of conversation.
Exactly. In the shadows, in the closets, in the dark, that we don't talk about it. Something else that popped up when you were talking about what you were just talking about. My dissertation is on, I did focus on cisgender individuals for my research. And the research was on the evolution of healthy male sexuality and women's role in that emergence.
Oh, powerful.
Thank you. And I feel like I'm getting a little emotional right now.
Good.
I believe that most humans in our culture today receive messages that sex isn't talked about, or it's like we just said, it's in the shadows and it's the dark. The reason why I think I feel so much pain towards little boys is not only is that the case for everyone, but there is a culture, a culturization, indoctrination about what it is to be a boy. And I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's basically like, don't show you're vulnerable, don't express emotions, be tough,
don't cry, man up,
don't cry, man up. Mahalik did a research on this, talking about the boys' norms, and it's basically don't express emotions unless it's anger. Right. So to me, we're all stifled, but then little boys are stifled. They're double stifled. Yeah. And then they grow up to be men and cock havers, and they don't have the support. And so these circles are to help that gap. Yeah. And we all need it, but there is a particular tenderness for me in regards to boys and men and cock owners.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. And actually, based on a client session I did yesterday where I was talking with a man about, his having been more vulnerable and sharing more with the women he's starting to date, and how, exciting and terrifying that's been. And I started to think about, experiences I've had. When my ex-husband was vulnerable with me, there were moments where I couldn't handle it. Whatever our dynamic was, I don't know. But there were moments where I kind of lost it, or I would cry, or I'd feel like, well, now you're going to leave me, or whatever would happen for me. And I was thinking about Brene Brown's story. I don't know if you know, of a man coming up to her and saying like, well, yeah, in some ways women say they want us to be vulnerable, but my wife and daughters would rather, see me go down with the horse basically than, than fall off of it. And I started writing an article last night about how we again, this is my traditional gender roles as women, really need to be able to learn to hold men's vulnerability. And I guess we could do that across all genders, right? People need to hold, but specifically that men or cock owners have been put in this box of do not show that vulnerability, or you're weak, you're bad, you're wrong, you're not a man, and all of that. And then women, I think there's this terror that sometimes we can have, and we can get, disgusted. We can get distant and dismissive and all these things when we see a man's vulnerability, because we haven't seen a lot of it. So I think it's really uncomfortable, and I think it has us feel scared, like, wait, that's my role, and what do I do now? And are you going to still support me? And are you going to still be able to be strong with me? And so, right, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but I think it's a very similar topic and idea of the kind of extra support that I've seen boys and men need in this area of being able to be honest, be vulnerable, have their truth heard and held, so that they're not walking around feeling lonely, ashamed, isolated. Yeah.
I have a quote here from Brene Brown. It says, "You show me a woman who can sit with a man in real vulnerability and fear. I'll show you a woman who's done incredible work. Yeah. You show me a man who can sit with a woman who has just had it and can't do it anymore, and he really listens. I will show you a guy who's done a lot of work." Mind you that yes, this is cisgender based.
Right. Exactly.
We get the impact of that. And something else that I'm reminded of in my dissertation, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's basically exposing how little opportunity that little boys often get to develop the emotional literacy and the emotional intelligence. And I mean, biologically, the book by Luann Brizendine, The Male Brain, talks about from infants the attention that little baby girls put on relationships and connection, and how much attention boys put on action and moving and doing things. So from like the very biological innate infancy, there is already this kind of difference between us, right? And so, and then socially, boys don't have as much skills to learn about their emotional literacy. So I want to help them.
No. And I do have hope. I mean, because when I walk into my son's preschool and they're all talking about, how to share your feelings and how to let someone know when your feelings got hurt, and they're meditating and they're doing all these things, I feel so grateful. And it's funny, when my son is very emotional, and sometimes there's a way where I'm like, am I raising him to be too emotional? And my guess is that's probably not the case. But because it's so not, commonly taught, there is a way I feel like I'm kind of going rogue a little bit. All right. There's not a lot of, examples I can look back on and see amongst my peers with our parents of, oh, this is how they supported, their boy to be more emotional, right? It's most of the men I know have had to do a lot of work and, to unwind all of that restriction and
suppression.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what the Cock Project is. It's the safest possible container for people to have those conversations that they never have. And this is another interesting that happens a lot in these circles for all people, is in hearing other people's stories, it actually reminds us of other stories. And there's a way in which when we can go back in our history and make sense of things, and put things back into their places, it actually helps our nervous system, and it helps us heal, and it helps us be like, okay, I'm not crazy. Things make sense that why this was painful or something like that. So
right. And I'm not crazy and I'm not alone. I mean, that could not be, I was going to say overrated. I don't know if that's exactly the right word, right? But it's like,
emphasized enough.
Yeah, exactly. It can't be emphasized enough. It is very healing for people to have that experience.
Yeah. And I definitely hear it in the Cock Project, but the Pussy Project as well. It is what you just said. I feel so relieved because I realized I'm not the only one who had that experience, whether it was being scared the first time they had an ejaculation, or whether it was their sister or their cousins or their neighborhood kids playing explorations with one another, or having arousal sensations and experimentations at young ages.
Yeah.
And for a few examples, if you will.
Yeah. And thinking all of those things, that there was something wrong with it.
Their whole life.
Right.
Until they come to the
whole life. So 30, 40 years later, sometimes they haven't been to therapy or done transformational work. And all of a sudden, oh my God.
And yeah.
It's painful.
It's painful, and it's exciting. It's hopeful, and it's relieving. And I'm so happy that these circles exist and people are showing up, and that I keep saying yes and making them happen around the country.
Yeah. And can you share how you came to create this? Because it's interesting, again, right? Me as a woman doing a podcast for men, you as a woman doing this Cock Project, because it started with the Cock Project and then you expanded to the Pussy Project, right?
That is correct. And I also want to say that it's not just me that's doing these circles. One of my primary co-leads, his name is Sean Patrick Mayer, and he was actually the facilitator with you. So I just wanted to give out credits to all the co-facilitators who do this work with me.
Yeah.
So I got a pretty direct download about 4 years ago. I thought for sure I was going to be a sexual empowerment coach for women. And that's where a lot of my attention and energy was, helping women, because I wanted to help people that were like me.
Right.
Until I got revealed a major blind spot that I couldn't unsee, and it took me over. And it was when a male friend of mine, we were just having a conversation, and he said, he was frustrated about this one particular clit stroking practice that focuses on the clitoris. And he said, well, what about the cock? And I thought that was a great question. So I said,
valid question.
Tell me about your cock. And I wasn't expecting what happened next was he got defensive and pushed back and said, what do you mean? What about my cock? And I was a little bit confused and innocently said, well, you said, what about your cock? So tell me about your cock. And I felt the stuckness and the pain and him getting stuck in the throat and not being able to share. And it just hit me like this population of our world has been left out largely in this conversation. And I immediately went online and looked up vagina monologues for men or, cock monologues or something. And how long has the vagina monologues been happening for 30 years, 30 something years? I don't know, something like that. And it hasn't really been done. And so that was that was my mission. I wanted to create cock monologues that was going to be as big as the vagina monologues. And that was how I stumbled upon the accident of the workshop, because I was actually trying to collect stories for the play that I was going to write. And in doing so in Boulder 4 years ago, I said, are there any men who want to share their stories? And if women want to come and listen, let's show up together. And it changed everyone's life who showed up, and my life. And and I realized that this was so important. I am being guided and moved by something greater than I ever have before. This is why I'm on the planet. Yeah. And I'm answering the call.
Thank you. Thank you for answering the call. I can relate to that feeling of like, right in my intro episode, I just talked about that same thing of like, I don't know why. And there's some part of me that's like, what, me? Really? Wait, I'm supposed to do this for men, but yet there it is. And it keeps coming through. And every time I try to go back to working with women, I'm like, I can't, it's not happening, or it's not flowing, Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing that I feel really excited about, my co-lead, Sean Patrick Mayer, he and I are going to start working with clients together in a collaborative sense, because there's a way in which I, as a woman, as a pussy owner, I can communicate and connect with and convey with clients in a way that Sean can't, and vice versa.
Yes.
And so I'm all about people still going to men's groups and women's groups and doing all that. And there's another layer of us doing this work together and really listening to each other from a place of love and compassion and curiosity.
I agree. Yeah, curiosity, right? I just imagined, what would it be like? I'm not saying, in the workplace, we have to start having all kinds of sexual conversations, but something you said earlier, I just realized like how in some ways this is personal, but in some ways it's just not personal, and what would it be like if people were walking around and that it was a valid topic out in public, just like, well, what do you do and what's important to you? And like, how do you feel about having a cock, or how do you feel about having a pussy? I mean, from where we sit right now, it's kind of a ridiculous and extremely vulnerable question. But that's one of the things I think about, which one of the things Marcia said in our asking for what you want conversation was that sex is one of the only things, maybe the only thing that we don't learn by watching others. I thought was amazing, right? Like we learn to eat, we learn to speak, we learn to walk, all of these things we learn to do, we witness others doing them. And then we can see, and then we can practice, and we practice, and other people help us, and then sex is in the dark, and our relationships with our bodies and our genitals seem in the dark in that way.
That's true. And I've never thought about it quite like that, never appreciating that thought and perspective. And the other thought that came up when hearing you say that is our younger generation, that's not totally true, in that they're being exposed to pornography at a very young age. Right. So not only are they're learning it to do it from a video or a computer very different perspective that's not always heart connected and authentic and real. And so it's the younger generation is learning differently than any generation ever has before. It's true, than any other generation that ever has before. It's very true. Yeah. There are some really beautiful cultures. I can't remember which culture it is, where they have a coming of age ceremony for the males, the boys, where they actually have their first orgasm in community and ceremony. And it's this
really
celebrated, beautiful thing. It's like,
wow, I would love to figure out where that is and
I think I could find you the person who told me that, if we could do that offline. So.
Yeah, that would be interesting though. It would be interesting for, I think, a lot of people to, even if it seems, right now I'm like, wow, okay, that is wild in some regards, and to actually see what their how they put this together and what their intention is, and then to see what the impact it has on those boys and girls and their culture would be really profound.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think we could talk about this for hours and hours, but what if there was one thing you wanted to leave people with? And I imagine all genders will listen to this podcast, and it's been more specifically for cock owners or people who identify as men. What do you want them to know? What feels important to you?
I feel so embarrassed because it feels so cheesy. But if I were, what's coming through, and what I wrote on my dissertation, I dedicated my dissertation to all the little boys who didn't get a chance to feel or express themselves, and I dedicate it to the little boys within the men who are still feeling some pain and sadness. So I just have this huge tenderness towards them. And I just want to strongly encourage anyone who feels called or inspired in any way, shape, or form to participate in these, and know that it's a healing experience for you, but it's also a massive, massive, tremendous gift for others. And I will say this too, that I've had a lot of mothers in the circle, in the witness circle, or mothers.
Yes, and as I attended,
and mothers to be, and they said, because of you've given me the gift of sharing what it was like for you to be a young boy with your penis as a young boy, I will go home and be different and show up and talk to my children about sexuality, so that they aren't in these circles 20 years from now.
Right. So not only is it having an impact on the other adults in the room, but it's having an impact on the next generation and our children. And that was exactly what happened for me. I mean, I had tears in my eyes. I was so moved. I think I couldn't stop crying at one point. And this realization of, oh my God, I mean, now it's figuring out, okay, what are the conversations I want to have, and what is age appropriate, and how to put this into practice. But I did leave there thinking, wow, and I'm a pretty conscious woman and have already wanted to be conscious about this with my son, but something happened where it just took it to a whole nother level of realizing the importance of being honest, and in a way, and figuring out how to do it in a way that actually works for him, but not hiding, not letting my own awkwardness or fear of the subject get in the way. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this, and for supporting, this relieving of shame, and for my child who, whether he ever meets you or not, has already been impacted by you.
Oh, I love hearing that.
And all the people he will have sex with, or he will be intimate with, right? Who knows?
Right.
But the ripple effect is huge.
Totally. And I want to offer you and all your listeners a resource, because I know that you mentioned how to decide what to tell, how to talk to your children. There's an amazing free, it's guidelines for comprehensive sexuality education, and I can send you the link.
Oh yeah, we'll put it in the podcast show notes.
Yeah, it's Norway's got it going on. I don't know where this comprehensive sexuality education program is being used, but it's super, super comprehensive and progressive, and it talks about gender identity and fluidity. It's I'll send you the link.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today. And where can people go to find you?
HazelGraceYates.com is my website. That's the easiest way to find me. You can send, if you want to have a discovery session, I'm a clinical sexologist, help people experience freedom around sexuality. So you can sign up for a discovery session on my website for us to have a conversation.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope it gives you a sense of what's possible and how good your life can be. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe to Man Alive and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/manalive to get outtakes, videos, and raw footage I only share there. These are some of the most interesting parts of these expert conversations. You can also grab your copy of The Unknown Power to accelerate your career and solidify your confidence with women, because the two are related, and I know you don't have to settle for one or the other. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.